It's Leap Day, and on today's show, I'm talking about Josh Jung making a big leap in year 2 as a starter for your Texas Rangers. Talk about all that and more on this episode of Locked On Rangers. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Rangers, your daily Texas Rangers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are locked onto the World Series champion Texas Rangers. I'm Bryce Paddock, a cripplingly addicted Texas Rangers fan, covering this team for 10 seasons, including all 5 as the founder and host of this podcast. Thank y'all so much for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. If you're not already, you can follow me on Twitter at Bryce Paddock. You can follow the show at Locked On Rangers. Hit subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and on YouTube, where the best way you can help grow the show is to comment nearly any single thing below. Now, before we get into the Rangers' first televised game of the spring, Ezekiel Duran making some impressions, talking about this team stealing more bases, and of course, the big leap that Josh Jung is hopefully going to make this year. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Now, the Rangers, it took them until almost March, not quite March, but the Rangers finally got their first televised game of the spring. Thank you to the Dodgers. Thank you to Yoshinobu Yamamoto for making your first start. And so the Rangers fans finally got to see their players on TV, or I guess on MLB TV, or wherever else you were watching this game. But another win for the Rangers, go to 4-1-1 in the Cactus League. Going for that Cactus League title, they are still behind the Dodgers, who are 5-1. Very important for this Cactus League title. I forgot what the actual name of the trophy is this year, because apparently they change it every single year, because why not? Because why wouldn't they? But this is a solid game for the Rangers. The star of the show was obviously Yoshinobu Yamamoto, the $300+ million man coming over from Japan, who I saw described on Twitter as his pitching style looks like a batting practice coach / home run derby thrower, and yet he is incredibly good. And yes, he was incredibly good. I mean, his first batter that he faced was Marcus Semien, and he got Marcus Semien to strike out, which is not something that happens quite a bit. And he got some really, really bad swings. Now, the rookie Evan Carter did get a single off of him, but he was promptly erased by a Wyatt Langford ground into a double play. A very hard hit ball, but ended up turning 2. Cody Bradford looked solid in his 2 innings of work, a couple of strikeouts, a walk, a hit, and a hit batter, but worked around that trouble, was able to get out of the jams that he put himself in. And Kirby Yates, we got to see for the first time this spring, and he looked very, very good. A perfect inning of work, a couple of strikeouts, and man, he was painting the corners. He looked really, really good against this Dodgers lineup that is incredibly talented. Again, it's just one spring outing, so it's hard to read too much into it, but an exciting and encouraging start from Kirby Yates in a Texas Rangers uniform. We got to see Josh Sborz pitch for the first time since Game 5 of the World Series, and it did not go as well as Game 5 of the World Series. No glove spike on his strikeout. Did give up a hit, a walk, a home run. The hit was the home run, a 2-run bomb, but the Rangers still prevailed. Got some nice stuff out of Jake Latz, who I really was impressed with in his outing of work. I think that he might be pushing for one of those lefty spots in the pen, kind of a dark horse candidate, but he was solid last year, played just a little bit at the big league level with the Rangers, just came in and basically just some innings eating situations late on in the season. I believe just a September call up, but hey, those innings were valuable. Every inning in the regular season was valuable last year, and even though he was just munching on some innings and entirely in losses, it was saving that bullpen and saving those starters and saving anybody else who might come in there from having to throw too many innings. And the Raiders needed every bit of work that they could get. But Latz was solid in his inning of work, a couple of strikeouts, a couple of hits, and a walk. Got himself into a jam, got himself out of the jam with a couple of big old strikeouts. That was encouraging stuff from him. And really, for me, on the offensive side, the star of the show was Ezekiel Duran. Continues his very, very hot spring, had a couple hits, including a triple that he absolutely laced to center field. Kind of a misplay by the center fielder who maybe could have caught it, but Zeke Duran hit the snot of the ball like he does very often and turned on those jets. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I forget how fast Ezekiel Duran is because we don't see that straight line speed a whole lot because he's not playing the outfield nearly as much, especially during this spring training when the Rangers don't have Corey Seager, when they don't have Josh Jung, so he's playing the left side of that infield. Still would like him to get some more reps in the outfield, but I mean, it seems like at this point, maybe backup reps at shortstop and third base and maybe first base are going to be where he gets most of his plate appearances because that outfield is pretty stacked. And the fourth outfielder is going to be the guy who's probably DHing every day in Wyatt Langford. So just seeing Ezekiel Duran uncork a massive throw, seeing him pull off that power, seeing him turn on those jets just reminds you how toolsy a guy this prospect is. And on most other teams, this would be a starting player somewhere, some position. Other teams would find a way to start this guy, give him every day at bats, whether that's at DH, whether that's at shortstop or second or third or first or heck, even in the outfield. The guy is an incredibly talented player, but it shows you, it's a testament to how stinking good this lineup is that there's not an everyday spot right now for Zeke Duran. But you do have a star shortstop in Corey Seager who has had some injury issues in the past and had some injury issues as recently as last year. And Zeke Duran kept this team afloat and was absolutely magnificent for that first half and absolutely crucial in the Rangers keeping their heads above water, not only above water, but dominating other teams and holding that big old lead in the AOS for the first half. Zeke Duran is a guy you should not be sleeping on, and these at-bats for him in spring training are massive to show, hey, yeah, you left me off the playoff roster for the most part. I got on there at the very end, did not play at all because of that Adolis Garcia injury. But this is still a valuable guy to this team, a valuable guy to this franchise, and I think I see very little way that he does not make the opening day roster, and having that kind of depth on your team is incredibly important and incredibly good. But this team, one thing I've noticed about spring training is that the Rangers have been stealing bases. It feels like a little bit more often. They've got 8 stolen base attempts so far. Last year, the Rangers were not very aggressive with the new rules in stolen base attempts, despite having a lot of pretty fast players. Honestly, they were very low in the attempt rate. They were good when they stole bases, but they did not attempt them very often. Last year, the Rangers stole 79 bases, which was the 27th most in Major League Baseball. The only teams they were ahead of were the Angels, the Rockies, and the Giants, who were in dead last. But their success rate was among the best in baseball. They stole bases at an 82.4% success rate last year. That was the 7th best rate in Major League Baseball. And most of the other teams that were succeeding that much were much higher in the attempts. The Mets were the best in terms of success rate, and they had the 13th most stolen bases. Diamondbacks had the 2nd best success rate, and they had the 2nd most stolen base attempts or successes, I should say. Phillies, the 3rd best success rate, 7th in attempts. Twins were the 4th best in attempts in the 23rd. They're the only team that was in the top 7%, or that was ahead of the Rangers, that wasn't in the top 10 in attempts, ahead of the Rangers in success rate versus attempts. And I think that's something that might change this year, not because just because the Rangers are going to have a philosophy change, but I think a lot of it is going to be due to the personnel. I mean, last year I thought the Rangers should have been a little bit more aggressive. A few guys who had been more aggressive in the past were a little bit less aggressive. We saw fewer stolen base attempts from Marcus Semien than the year before, but a better success rate. Just 14 stolen bases and only 3 times caught stealing. He was up over the 20 mark last year. I believe he had 25 stolen bases, but 8 times he was caught stealing. Adolis Garcia had been more aggressive in the past, but he had a great success rate. 9 stolen bases, just 1 time caught stealing. And the Rangers' stolen base leader last year, some of you might know this, but it was not a guy who was pretty much an everyday guy. It was Travis Jankowski. 19 stolen bases, just 1 time caught stealing. Travis Jankowski was an absolute monster on the bases last year. The only other guys in double-digit stolen bases last year for the Rangers were Leody Taveras, and yep, that's it. not a whole lot of double-digit stolen bases from guys. Last year, Zeke Duran had a much better success rate, just 8 stolen bases, just 4 times caught stealing. Evan Carter was 3-0, and I think that is one of the things that is going to lead to more stolen bases for the Rangers as a team. Usually these teams that are way up there in the successful stolen base category, they have one guy who just goes absolutely nuclear. Now, I don't know if Evan Carter is going to have like 50 stolen bases like Corbin Carroll or 70 stolen bases like Ronald Acuna Jr. did last year. But I think he's definitely going to be up there in the attempts. He's very fast. He knows when to run. I think Wyatt Langford's going to have quite a few stolen base attempts this year. And I think we'll still see quite a bit from Travis Jankowski whenever he's in, from Leo Taveras whenever he's playing. I think Adolis Garcia, we might see even less stolen base attempts from him. Maybe bump it up a little bit from Marcus Semien, but overall, I think this team is going to be a lot more aggressive on the base paths because they've got such a fast lineup, a fast outfield as well. And if you're DH in Wyatt Langford, I think we'll probably get at least 10 stolen base attempts, or at least 10 successful stolen bases this year, depending on when he comes up. If your DH is swiping bags for you, you have got a fast team. Something the Rangers did back in the 2010s that made them very successful, especially with these new rules. I don't see why they weren't more aggressive last year, but I think that's something they can definitely take advantage of, and another way they can get even better in 2024. Coming over to talk about what we saw from that first game, what we saw from this game, and a little bit of injury news that popped up right before I started recording this podcast. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Gametime. You shouldn't have to worry when you're buying tickets to your next big event. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee, Gametime takes all the guesswork out of buying tickets. You know exactly what you're getting with Gametime and exactly how much it's going to cost, exactly what it's going to look like, and you know the tickets are going to get sent right to your phone. It is the easiest way by far I've ever had buying tickets. Bought tickets to a Mavs game a couple weeks ago, and even though the Mavs didn't perform, Gametime really stepped up and came through. It was such an easy way to buy tickets. I recommend it very, very highly. I use it myself. It is such a great experience. Buying tickets is usually such a hassle, but with Gametime, it is so incredibly easy. 10 out of 10. Would highly recommend. So take that guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Shout out to the everydayers for making Locked On Rangers your first listen every single day. I'll be back later tonight talking about Evan Carter, what to expect from the youngster in his first full season in the big leagues. Now, right before I started recording this episode, we got some injury news. Unfortunately, Dustin Harris was scratched late from today's lineup, and according to Bruce Bochy, it was just, quote, a little soreness in the oblique area, end quote. So hopefully it's nothing too major for Dustin Harris. I don't think that Harris is going to make the opening day roster, but definitely some AAA depth that if there are an injury or a couple injuries at the major league level in the outfield, Dustin Harris is a guy who I think would be right up there for the call to come up on the roster. Now, I don't know if he would start every day. It would take a little bit of more injuries for him to get out there, but hey, you'd hate to see anybody get hurt in spring training. Hopefully it's just a couple of days, just a little bit of soreness, and he ends up being okay. Now, a couple of news and notes that came in yesterday. The Rangers are adding some more TV games, thankfully. It's about freaking time. It is, the Rangers were one of the fewest televised games in spring training. They had, I believe, 7 on the books, including away broadcasts. But the Rangers will add games on March 12th versus Cleveland, March 19th versus Oakland, March 22nd versus the Rockies, March 26th, the last spring training game versus Boston, which will be at Globe Life Field. Thankfully, the Rangers are going to be playing those games on TXA 21, so if you do not have Bally Sports, you might be able to catch some Rangers spring training games. The Rangers finally got that deal ironed out with Bally, so that's why there were so many questions, and it was so late on that the Rangers were broadcasting their first televised game. I mean, it was about 4 games that the Rangers were initially going to broadcast. It was the March 14th, the 16th, the 18th, and the 25th. One of those dress rehearsal games in Globe Life Field that are going to be against Boston the couple of days before the regular season starts. Thankfully, the Rangers will have several more games. There will also be several away broadcasts. Hopefully, I enjoy the away games more because those are more often televised than these Rangers games. And also, the away stadiums sometimes have StatCast data, which the Rangers still don't have in their spring training facility. I don't know why. It's kind of annoying, especially going to be very annoying not seeing what the radar gun is saying for all these pitches for Nate Eovaldi, because that is one of the most important things that I'm tracking this spring training. But alas, I digress. Some bad news that came through the other day, I believe it was yesterday. Former Texas Rangers coach Hector Ortiz passed away at the age of 84. He had been battling cancer. He was a longtime Rangers coach. He was I believe, third base coach. Also spent some time as a bullpen coach, first base coach, bullpen coach, a little bit time as a catching coordinator from 2015 to 2020. Thoughts and prayers with Hector Ortiz and his family, a beloved member of the Rangers coaching staff, and very sad to see him no longer with us anymore. Now, on a very different note, we are going to talk about Josh Jung. Josh Jung, a guy who I have watched for many, many years, a guy who I have been a big, big believer in since I saw him as a freshman at Texas Tech University. Many, many moons ago, I was still a young, bushy-eyed, bushy-tailed, bright-eyed college student, full of hope and optimism in the Rangers' future, and that was definitely placed well, because little did I know the Rangers would be winning a World Series championship in 2023 with the guy that I was watching at the time as a freshman at Texas Tech in Josh Jung. Was a Rangers first-round pick out of Texas Tech after 3 years there. Really didn't spend a whole lot of time in the minors due to injuries. Was a very polished hitter from the time that the Rangers drafted him 6th overall in the 2019 MLB draft. Just a very, very good hitter. Not a whole lot of hope for his defense, which he really proved all of us skeptics wrong. Of guys who had watched him for a long, long time, I thought, all right, Josh Jung is going to hit. Is he going to play defense great at third base? He's going to hit. That was the profile on Josh Jung, basically from the time that he started at Texas Tech. Did spend some time in college at shortstop, but that was not pretty. He is not a shortstop, but he is a darn good defensive third baseman. That is one of the things that surprised everyone this year. One of the things that I loved about Josh Jung is not just that he is a good hitter, a polished hitter, was a very well-rounded hitter in college, hit to all fields, walked at a pretty decent rate, didn't strike out too much, and that kind of changed as he went through the minors, and especially in the big leagues. That was basically his biggest problem was not walking nearly enough and striking out at a very alarming clip. But the defense, I mean, this guy is a gym rat. He is every kind of, scrappy, baseball-obsessed adjective that you could hope to ascribe to a player. And the times where he was sitting on the bench because he was injured, because of those random freak injuries, whether it was the broken foot, the stress fracture in his foot in spring training several years back, whether it was the torn labrum that we thought was going to take him out for the entire year in 2022, but he worked his butt off and he sat there and he was still around spring training, was still trying to glean every single bit of knowledge he could from every big leaguer around him. Ended up making his debut that year, was still playing hurt for those last 2 months where he came up and got back and got healthier faster than anybody thought. And then last year, all he did was take the league by storm, start the All-Star game, and win a World Series in his first full season as a big leaguer. And he was a huge part of the Rangers offense last year. I mean, he absolutely crushed the ball, and he absolutely dominated lefties. I mean, he was astoundingly good against left-handed pitching. In 117 plate appearances, he had 9 home runs, hit over 325, and OPS just 5 points short of 1,000 against lefties. The guy destroyed lefties. Now, against righties, he was not nearly as good. His on-base was below 300. He hit below 250. Did have a 718 OPS, 14 home runs in just shy of 400 plate appearances. Not great, but not terrible either. When I was looking at his expectations for his first full year in the big leagues, there were just a couple of counting stats that I wanted for Josh Jung, that I was hoping for Josh Jung. I was hoping for, obviously, a mostly healthy season, Unfortunately, due to Jorge Soler hitting the absolute snot out of a baseball and it hitting him right in the thumb in August at the least opportune time. Not that there's an opportune time to get your thumb broken, but that was really not a good time and kind of led to a Rangers spiral. But I was hoping for, about 20 to 25 bombs. I thought that would be a reasonable expectation for the 25-year-old rookie. I thought an OPS somewhere in the 750 to 800 range, and with a 781 OPS, 23 home runs, both those check and check. And I thought somewhere between a 2 and 3 WAR season. I thought that was about what to expect from him last year. A 2.4 WAR season in 122 games. Absolute check. A very successful season for Josh Jung, but I think he's still a little bit disappointed in the results and definitely thinks that he can do a lot better, even though a lot of these projection systems think, I don't know about that Josh Jung season. He's going to have to prove it to me again. Come back and look at what those projections say, what I think he's going to do, and what he needs to work on to get better in 2024. Right after this word from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. There's all kinds of different bets you can make, and I've been talking about Josh Jung and how I think he is going to be sensational this year. Right now, if you're wanting to bet on him to be the AL MVP, you've got some steep odds. The 26th best odds, according to FanDuel, plus 12,000, just ahead of Tristan Casas and just behind Giancarlo Stanton of the Yankees, and just behind his teammates, of course, Corey Seager up there in the top 3, Marcus Semien up there in the top 12, I believe, and Adolis Garcia just a little bit ahead of him at plus 8,000. So go check out those odds, see what bets you want to make. Go to FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Shout out to the Everydayers for making Locked On Raiders your first listen every single day. On a Friday, I'll be back and talking about what we've learned from the first couple of weeks of spring training and maybe a little bit of your mailbag questions I'll be able to get to. Now, Josh Jung, the things that he did well last year: hit the absolute tarnation out of the baseball, play defense, and those are most of the things that he did very, very well. Which, as a third baseman, that's kind of your job. Play some solid defense, hit some bombs, and just overall produce some pretty solid offense. This is a very offense-heavy position. He is not the heir apparent to Adrian Beltre, because he is not Adrian Beltre, and thankfully it has been several years since the Rangers have had Adrian Beltre as their third baseman, so the expectations on Mr. Joshua Ryan Jung to become Adrian Beltre, a first ballot Hall of Famer, a nearly unanimous first ballot Hall of Famer, those expectations are a little bit lower, which is great, because Josh Jung is his own player, and he is a very good player. The things that he did very, very well last year in terms of his StatCast profile, the outs above average, he was in the top 9% of baseball, and the sweet spot percentage, which means the getting the ball, the barrel of the bat on the ball, top 2% of all of baseball. Then you look at his xwOBAcon, which is one of those stats on StatCast. Even I had to look up. I'm like, what the heck does this mean? Because it said he was in the top 10% at a .453 xwOBAcon. Well, that is the expected weight on base, average on contact. Basically, it is a catch-all metric that removes strikeouts, walks, and hit by pitches to measure the productiveness of a hitter when they put the ball into play. So basically, how good is he hitting the ball when he makes contact, taking out of account strikeouts and walks, which are two things that he did not do well. So it makes sense that Josh Jung is among the best in xwOBAcon, or if you look at it, it's xwOBAcon, which is now how I'm going to see it for the rest of time. His xwOBAcon is very stinking good, because when this guy makes contact, he absolutely launches that thing, which is hilarious, because I remember very, very vividly a lot of draft analysts, a lot of scouts and people who are paid a lot of money, not as much as the actual scouts, the actual front office, to analyze the draft. Those media pundits were saying, this Josh Jung kid, he's got an advanced approach, and maybe he'll go through the minors pretty quickly. He's not going to be that great at defense, and I don't know if he's going to hit for power. This is a guy who was 21 years old at the time, and so he wasn't exactly stinging the crap out of the baseball, because he still had a lot of development to go. I mean, when he was 20 years old, he had 12 home runs and 6 triples at Texas Tech. His last year is 15 home runs and 23 doubles, a 636 slugging percentage as a 21-year-old at Texas Tech. It wasn't insane. It wasn't Wyatt Langford level, but I mean, not everybody's going to be Wyatt Langford. And the thing that I love about Josh Jung is another thing that I also love about Wyatt Langford, is that both these guys are first-round picks. And both these guys are probably going to be really darn good at the big league level. Josh Jung has already been good at the big league level, already been an all-star. And the thing that I love about that is that the Rangers have such a terrible history of succeeding with first-round draft picks. I mean, all these different metrics, all of these, oh, look at how little WAR the Rangers have gotten from first-round draft picks since, well, you name it. Go back to a year. Go back the entire 21st century. Whatever century this is. I don't even know at this point. Go back as long as you like, and the Rangers have been honestly pretty trash at first-round draft picks. Now, at this point, I think of the first-round draft picks that the Rangers have in the big leagues right now, I think Josh Jung might be the second best because Cole Reagans is incredible at this point. It would have been nice for Cole Reagans to be incredible here, but I digress. Josh Jung is a position player, a third baseman, a first-round pick, a top first-round pick, a top 10 pick, in a very loaded 2019 draft where the Rangers missed on Josh Jung. I mean, the other guys in that draft are just insane. I mean, Adley Rutschman going 1-1. I believe that was the Bobby Witt Jr. draft. I know that Gunnar Henderson was in that draft, one of the first picks after the first round. I believe the first pick of the second round. And so if the Rangers didn't hit on that 2019 draft, that would be a real bad look because of how many darn good players are there. But Josh Jung, the thing that he needs to improve, it's the thing that I think he can improve. And I think that he can work with El Bombi, with Adolis Garcia, because the thing that Adolis Garcia needed to improve, it's the walk rate. It's the expanding the strikeout. It is the strikeout rate. Expanding the strike zone was something that Josh Jung did a little bit too frequently last year. Now, I kept noticing that he kept getting squeezed on the zone, especially in the ALCS, especially in that game against Justin Verlander. It felt like Verlander was getting all these calls, especially on Josh Jung, that was, forcing him to expand the zone because, like, well, if Justin Verlander is going to get that call, 3 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches off the plate, then I got to expand the zone to try and stay in this at bat because I don't want to get called out looking on a pitch that is, well outside the zone. So not expanding the zone, working that walk rate up to even closer to league average. Right now, he was in the 16th percentile of walk rate, just walked at a 5.8% clip. League average is 8.4%. If he could jump that up, that would be huge. Doesn't even have to go, quite the Adolis Garcia level of increasing his walk rate. His rookie year, Adolis Garcia had a 5.1% walk rate, which was in the bottom 6% of the league. Last year, jumped that all the way up to 10.3%. Only bumped it up 1% his second year, and then doubled it from his rookie year. More than doubled it from his rookie year this year, which is why Adolis Garcia had so much success. Now, the strikeout rate for Adolis Garcia is still not elite. It's still right around where it was in his second full year in the big leagues at 27.7% this year. It was 27.9% the year before, so not a huge increase. But just by working those walks, just by showing the pitchers he is not going to expand the zone, and Adolis Garcia, one of the things that he did very well is when you're used to expanding the zone, and when you go from that to taking more pitches, taking more borderline pitches, you're going to get rung up more often looking. And I think that's something you just got to live with as a hitter. Sometimes if you're a patient hitter, if you are taking a lot of borderline pitches, sometimes the calls don't go your way. And you've got to be okay with that, and you've got to live with the results of that. Because overall, yes, he got called out looking on more pitches that were maybe not strikes or maybe were strikes, but pitches that Adolis Garcia would not have taken earlier on in his career. And the results spoke for themselves. I mean, y'all saw how incredibly good El Bombi was last year. I mean, the amount of success, the amount of more quality pitches that he got to hit, and he was doing damage when he got those pitches. Adolis Garcia was doing damage when he got those pitches earlier in his career, but he wasn't getting as many of them. That's where Josh Jung is right now. He doesn't have the insane level of raw power of Adolis Garcia, but that guy's got some pop. He's got some big boy strength, some home runs that he hit, a lot of them to the opposite field. That is not something you can do if you are a not very strong man. Joshua Ryan Young, my large adult son, is a very strong man. I mean, I remember it very vividly, a grand slam the opposite field he hit against Nestor Cortez, against the Yankees at home. It was a massive shot for him, and he did that all over. I mean, his spray chart for his home runs, I mean, there are a lot of them. It's pretty equally distributed, a little bit more on the pull side, but I mean, you just get more pull side power. But Josh Jung, if you can learn from what Adolis Garcia improved on, talk to him. Just talk to the hitting coaching staff. I mean, we've seen them improve that from Adolis Garcia and from some other guys. Part of what led to the breakout year from Ezekiel Duran is he was a very similar hitter as well, although I think he was even less prone to walk than Josh Jung, even though I think he had a higher walk rate last year. I mean, the aptitude for walkability for Josh Jung, I think that's there. And I think that's something he's going to develop into his game. I think that's something that should happen this year. But the projections for him, right now, according to Baseball Reference, they expect him to not have the strongest season this year, which I was kind of perplexed by. They project him to have 468 plate appearances, which is even fewer than this past year. They expect him to hit 261 with a 780 OPS, which is right around what he did this year. FanGraphs, unsurprisingly, is a hater on a Rangers player. They really penalize him for that strikeout rate, and they expect him next year to play in significantly more games, 147 as opposed to 122. But they have it on base at 305, dropping down. They have the slugging percentage dropping down. They have the batting average dropping down. The WRC plus last year was 10% above league average at 110. They expect it to be 102 this year. They project him to still have a 2.5 FanGraphs WAR, but in 25 more games, so an overall worse year. I think Josh Jung is only going to get better. His aptitude, his obsession, his aptitude for greatness, his obsession with baseball, and the obsession to get every little nugget out of his talent, I think that's really what separates him. It's one of the things that I think makes Corey Seager so incredibly great, and I think that it is something that the Rangers saw in Josh Jung when they drafted him in the top 10 in 2019. He proved them all wrong in his rookie year, starting the All-Star game. Not just making the All-Star game, but starting it. And I think the ceiling is incredibly high for Josh Jung. He's definitely got some ways to go to improve, but this is an incredibly talented player. And after an All-Star season and a championship in his first year, the guy has got nowhere to go but up. That's going to do it for today's show. Thank y'all so much for listening and subscribing, and until next time, don't forget to enjoy World Series champion Texas Rangers baseball.